Hello. So today I've been thinking about this whole idea of using your voice, and I wanted to tie it into a few sort of yoga principles in terms of why we find it so hard to be able to speak what is our personal truth. So let's just look at the sort of big picture of our physical anatomy. So your diaphragm is here, and when you breathe in, this big dome muscle right at the base of your rib cage, it pulls down into your belly and it allows your lungs to expand. And then when you exhale, it pushes back up again into the rib cage cavity, and it pushes the air out of your lungs. And this inhale and exhale, it forces all of the organs here in your abdomen to kind of move out of the way, because we don't have space in our bodies. So when this diaphragm goes to pull down, it pushes all of those organs out of the way, and we don't have any ribs or anything here. We're meant to be able to expand through this area of our body, and yet that's getting harder and harder for us to do. So this movement that is here, that's meant to happen, every time you breathe in, there's something that needs to happen in your belly. Your belly needs to be able to expand because everything's getting pushed out of the way. So those organs want to be able to move outward with every inhale, right? Okay, so let's move on to the next piece of this puzzle. That there are two supporting diaphragms in your body. One is the pelvic floor. So the pelvic floor sort of works in keeping with the diaphragm, so that when you breathe in, there is this sort of downward movement, right? Moves down. And then as you exhale, things push back up again. Breathe in, breathe out. So what happens on your pelvic floor, if you think even about like even a Kegel. So as you inhale, there's just sort of this release of the pelvic floor. Those muscles get to let go. Sometimes I use the visualization of bloom, right? They just kind of open on that pelvic floor. And then as you exhale, so think about the exhale, your whole body kind of lets go. That's when the pelvic floor engages and lifts up and hangs on, so that there's always some part of your body giving you stability. So just imagine that this is connected to this pelvic floor, and this inhale expands and creates a push out, right? And then the exhale lifts, right? Pushes everything upwards again. Okay, now the second supporting diaphragm that's in our body is right here, the vocal diaphragm. And so this diaphragm, when we breathe in, it almost expands like this. And then when we breathe out, it shuts. And then when we breathe in, and then we breathe out. So it starts to work as this really beautiful trifecta in your body, so that there is always this expansion being available when breath is coming into your body, and then as breath leaves the body, you know, these two pieces just sort of hold everything together. Expansion and then contraction. Expansion and then contraction. And so when I examine this whole idea of us not being able to use our voices, it comes back to, for me, to the idea that we have not been very good at using our breath. We have, go back into the clothing that we wore centuries, and everything from a cinched belt here to a corset, right? To all of the clothing that we wear, like the tight pair of jeans that we cram ourselves into that stop the expansion of your belly to be able to go out. So all of a sudden this diaphragm, because of the clothing that we're wearing, it tries to pull down, but it can't really push those organs anywhere, because there's so much constriction happening around this waist area that we can't breathe. We can't breathe. And so we lose, because this can't move, it starts to lose the connection to the pelvic floor, and it starts to lose the connection to the voice. When we lose connection to our pelvic floor and to our vocal diaphragm, we also lose the ability of these areas in some way. So think about the sociological reasons that we might find ourselves hampered in some way, either sexually or repressed or vocally repressed, right? That it just doesn't kind of work as well. So sexually, it might be things like women are always portrayed as either virgins or whores. Like there's no in between. You are either the glorified mother or you are not, right? So there's a whole bunch of judgment and rules and status quo belief systems around sexuality and how it must be a certain way and it must not be other ways. And there's a repression that takes place around how sexuality is meant to be expressed and how it is not meant to be expressed. So this repression isn't being supported, isn't being helped to expand and open by our breath. It's being supported by the fact that we can't breathe properly. Come to your voice. Think about all the times through history that anyone with a powerful voice has been killed. You could think, just going back to witch burnings or burnings at the stake, to the trials of Salem, to the witch burnings. You could go back to just assassinations of people like Martin Luther King. Anyone who tries to use that voice in a way that does not support what's going on in the status quo of society is a threat. So this voice becomes a threat. Now, when we can't breathe, we start to make shallow our own voice. And I just look at all the different ways that we are not breathing properly in our society right now. And I just think, man, I wonder, I'm just curious, if we could come back to allowing this diaphragm, this main organ, to actually move as deeply down into the abdomen as it's capable of moving in our biological anatomy. And if we were able to connect it to the supporting diaphragms of the vocal cords and the pelvic floor, man, could we reclaim both our sexuality and our voice? Could we find the power that lies in that personal truth again? And is our access to our personal truth through our breath? I think so. But you guys know how I think. So I would just want to leave you with that titillating little question today to consider. So thanks for listening.